So we've looked at weather and conditions as part of the planning process. So we're still in the planning process. Let's have a look at you and your party and the mountain landscape. We'll start off with you and your party. And this is something obviously that you can do a lot about. You can't really control the weather and conditions, but you can do a lot about this. First question is, how good is your nav? So if you're going out with a guide, well, they'll want you to know what you're doing with ice axe and crampons at least. But if you're going out with yourself or your friends, you will need to have very, very good navigation. You'll need to be confident in it. Because as we've seen in some of the pictures, complete whiteout can be very, very difficult to navigate through, especially when you've got potential for cornices and avalanche slopes. So you can read published reports, get information from other people who know the area that you're visiting, and quite honestly, if your navigation is not very good, go on a course. And naturally I'm going to recommend National Navigation Award Scheme courses because I run them. So in the app you can go to your hazard levels and advice to tell you what is happening in terms of avalanches. So whatever you're doing, had a really nice climb, fairly good visibility here. It's a bit of snow coming down, but nothing particularly bad, till we got to the top and it turned into a nice whiteout. So this wasn't actually snowing, it was spindrift being lifted up from the ground by wind, and it was also mist. So even in the mist in the Cairngorms or in the mountains, with some wind, can equal a whiteout condition. So there is absolutely no horizon on the visibility. You can only just about see where the horizon is just by that one person walking ahead. We don't have many daylight hours also in winter. So if it gets dark, you've not only got the avalanche hazards, cornices and so forth to worry about, but you've got zero visibility. And you could be in terrain like this. So the Cairngorms doesn't have as many of the knife edge ridges as the mountains over on the west coast. However, it does have quite sudden cliffs and so forth that you need to be aware of that can be quite easy to walk off. Now, shown in yellow, orange and red are all the slopes that are between 30 to 45 degrees. And these are the most avalanche prone slopes. Now, obviously, they won't all be avalanchy. It will depend a lot where the prevailing winds have been dumping snow. But these are all of an angle where, should the conditions be right, you could be facing avalanches. How good is your nav? So equipment and clothing, we're still in the planning phase, so we can have a checklist. We can go through and see what we're going to need. Yes, winter packs are heavy. I've got a much bigger rucksack that I use in winter because I've got a lot more equipment that I'm carrying. A lot of it tends to get wet as well, so I don't want to have everything stuffed so that the bag is pretty much bursting at the seams. I need to have that bit of extra space in the bag so that I can rummage around in there quite happily. And when things do get wet and take up a bit more space, I'm not having to hang things off the outside of my bag. I do not like anything flapping around, especially in high winds in winter. So it's essential that you know what you're doing with crampons and an ice axe. Full stop. So even as me as a guide, if you're coming with me, I want you to at least know what you're doing. You can walk in crampons quite happily, and you know how to use an ice axe. Even if I'm doing all of the nav. If you're going sort of backcountry skiing, it's important that you carry transceivers, probes and shovels, and that you are well practiced in using them. So, in terms of experience, you must be equipped and skilled and prepared for your particular trip. If you're not, get a guide or go out with friends who are more experienced than you. Join a mountaineering club perhaps. This is just how you build up your experience. You need to go off and start having your adventures, but certainly guides are normally, depending on how serious the situation is, quite happy to let folks sort of do a bit of nav with them, and get into their thought processes. It's all ways that you can build up your experience. So that's all I'm going to really say on that. A lot of it goes around equipment. Do not go and spend an absolute fortune on gear. If you're coming on a course with me, you can borrow crampons and an ice axe from myself for the duration of the course. And I would recommend you go and hire boots, however, and the crampons that go with it, just because you'll see the difference in wearing mountaineering boots as opposed to your summer leather boots with some strap-on crampons. So let's move on. This is something else that we can change, believe it or not, the mountain landscape. And I'm not talking about getting a load of dynamite and blowing half the mountainside off. I'm talking about we can go to a different range. Simple as that. So, you and your party, this is something else we can do. We don't even have to go out, bear in mind. We can have a nice day gear shopping if the weather's too pants for us. So, first question is where we're going. Is it steep? Most avalanches will occur on slopes steeper than 30 degrees. So between 30 and 45 degrees is kind of like the golden range. And again, we can read our published avalanche reports to determine where and what levels of hazard exist. But do we really understand what the hazard level means for our location? We can use a contour tool to check slope angles and shape. So in your app as well, we'll come on to some of this. There's a lot of information about terrain considerations as well as the avalanche levels. What slopes are you going to encounter? Bear in mind that wind it will transport snow and form unstable wind slab if it's above 15 miles an hour. It's essential that you're confident in using crampons and ice axes, as we said before. And you need to consider the terrain that you're moving through. Is it complex? So does it require good navigation and constant evaluation? It can be hard work dealing with snow and all of those other factors about avalanches and cornices to bear in mind, as well as other terrain traps, which I'm about to come on to. So really do read up on the avalanche forecast and then compare it to your map. So hazard levels and advice, again, you can find that in your app. Here is it, the sort of hazard table again. Remember that we have a written set of instructions really telling us what the avalanche forecast is going to be. It is a forecast. They're generally very, very good. And the avalanche rose really gives us just that snapshot overview. And bear in mind that even on the sort of North Corries of Ben Nevis and the Cairngorms, you do get the spurs and the ridges which create easterly and westerly aspects. So in our planning phase, we can use a tool such as this, and I give these out on courses. So this is a little slope angle tool, and it's really nifty. So if your contours are, for example, you can compare it to your map at this distance apart, you know that you're in an avalanche prone slope. It's given you also the distance for index contours to make things very quick and easy. But even that 10-metre contour interval could put a lot of heavy snow on top of you. 10 metres, bear in mind, is about 33 feet, and that's bigger than my 2 up, 2 down. So 10 metres is considerable. Right, let's start applying this. So we're in our mountain landscape. This is the area that I tend to go to most during winter courses, not always, but most of the time this is the area that we will be operating in. So here is marked on this particular day, so this is going back to our example, this is marked all of the areas between 900 metres and above that are in that northeasterly and eastern aspects that are of the right angle to produce an avalanche in that considerable zone. So all of these areas in orange have got that considerable avalanche risk. So a lot of my climbing areas in Corian-Schnechter are totally out for that day. Potentially some of the ridges you might consider climbing, doing some of the ridge climbs. Well, you've got to get there first. If we add in our between 600 and 900 meters moderate avalanche risk, well, we get a few areas that we might want to avoid, a few extra. But on the whole, actually, you know, from this kind of seriously doom and gloom looking shape, when you put this on the map, and you can use that that tool in the previous slide to help you kind of do this. There's apps that can do it now as well, such as FatMap and Outdoor Active. Once you put this information on the map, actually there's loads of areas that we can go. We can still go Bag Cairngorm and go for a nice tour of the Northern Corries and have a really nice day out. We still need to be aware, however, that we are in avalanche territory. So just because something isn't quite of the right slope or the right angle and so forth, nature is nature and it will do weird things. So we still need to have our wits about us. So it's quite helpfully when you're out and about, we have a slope angle checker as part of your app, and you can literally line it up with the slope and it will tell you if you're in an avalanche zone. There's another nice little nifty way, which is slightly less lower tech, which is just to use one of your walking sticks or a ski stick, and we can show you that out on the hills. So I kind of said, you know, on that map that we just looked at, it looked actually a lot nicer once we plotted the avalanche areas onto it. But bear in mind that avalanches have three areas where they have a start zone, and that is the 30 to 45 degree angle. They have a path that the debris will go down. So they won't just stay on that 45 down to 30 degree angle. They will move and they will go onto lower areas. So the avalanche runs, typically 15 to 25 degrees, can cause a lot of damage here. They can pick up rocks, other sort of detritus and debris, as well as snow being itself being extremely heavy. And it can deposit this down in the depositional run-out zone. So even here, you know, I would be a little bit wary of going pretty much anywhere on this. So here we've only got kind of like 50, 60 meters between, you know, where the river is in terms of height and a moderate avalanche risk. Likewise here in Corian-Schnechter, a really popular climbing venue, you know, I've still got to get into it. I've got to go up these crag aprons, which are kind of just below a considerable avalanche zone. Do I want to be there? No, not really. So I might choose to go somewhere else for the day, perhaps do the Firkall Ridge. So bear in mind, this is an overview, it's not an exact science, and nature never plays ball. So we've looked at the main sort of problem, which is that slope, the slope angle in terms of our terrain. Where are we going? But there are other things we need to bear in mind. Terrain traps, such as valleys like this. So I don't know if anyone of you has walked up the kind of standard Baggers route on Buccleuchty Moor at the top of Glencoe. In winter, this is an absolute classic valley terrain trap as you get higher up, because the path goes right through the middle and you've got quite steep slopes on either side of you. And it was only a few years ago that a few people died in an avalanche. Now, they weren't in an avalanche zone per se, they were in a run-out zone. They were in this valley trap. So be very cautious of going somewhere where there is potential for an avalanche risk above you. Likewise, and this is something that's common in the Cairngorms, are convexities. So we want to avoid this because we've got, you know, potentially the snow is kind of with gravity, this part of it is being pulled to the left and this part is being pulled rather more forcefully down. You've got an area that could crack. And once this splits, vroom, it's going to go. So convexities, and it will tell you in the written information in the avalanche report, which we looked at, whether convexities are going to be a problem. But again, we are looking for the right angles for things to go. Cliffs, well, quite an obvious thing. We want to avoid them as much as we can. And bear in mind the cornices as well. Do not ever be tempted to go and stand out on a cornice or take a picture, or have somebody take a picture of you stood on the cornice. Even if the avalanche hazard is very low, it is not impossible. Never stand on a cornice. It's another reason your nav needs to be very good. I cover this sort of information and avoiding them, funnily enough, on gold NNAS courses. So you need to be equipped for the winter mountains. So you can check on my website all activities and then plus the winter kit if you're ever in doubt, and you can find it here. You can also download a checklist. You will need to be confident with navigation if you're going out by yourself or with friends. But even if you're just going with a guide, you need to know how to use an ice axe and crampons. You'll need to become proficient at reading avalanche and weather forecasts and putting that information onto a map in order to plan your route. So that's all I'm going to say really on the planning. We've kind of covered this whole area. We're going to move now into taking this onto your journey.